I always tell people, I'm like, don't shy away from understanding that it's okay to move. And if you're in pain and there's different areas that you feel like, I just don't know where to get started, we can always modify. There's people all around that have a wealth of knowledge. I mean, a lot of your exercise program and routines are so good for a lot of people because it's this low like resistive exercise where you're not loading the joints in all these different areas that could be painful. You're really creating a good foundation for a lot of people.
What's up, everybody, and welcome back to this week's episode of It Takes Grit. I have got Clint Harwick in the house with me today. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling good. How are you?
Yes, he's feeling great because he's also the dog whisperer, and the dogs absolutely are loving you. This is what happens is when you come in and you're a guest, you get two therapy dogs.
This is awesome. I'm going to walk away here feeling relaxed.
Yeah, feeling relaxed and having lots of cuddles. Well, I'm really excited today because I know that loads of my audience have so many questions about injuries, when to come back from an injury, how to recover, what you should do if you've got bad knees, if you've got a bad back. So we're going to go through all the things today. But first of all, I want you to introduce yourself and tell us all your credentials and who you are.
Yeah,
so yes,
totally.
brag about yourself.
That's tough. But so I come from an athletic background. So I played as a professional athlete in baseball. And then after that, I've always been in the exercise science world. So I got my undergrad in exercise science. I went on to study physical therapy. And then I've progressed into finishing my doctorate in physical therapy too. So rehab, exercise, all those areas I come with, I would say, a good amount of knowledge of those categories because I spent the last 10 years studying it. So I get fired up on that. I just want people to move and I want people to just enjoy the process of it. And if they're in pain, let's modify. And that's kind of like my biggest passions is putting that out there.
I love that too. And then we're going to put all of Clint's details of your Instagram and your podcast as well underneath. But it's just it's so incredible because I have that passion too. It's like, what exercise should I do? How should I do it? It's just move. Getting your body moving is so important for not just your physical body, but for your mental health as well. Isn't that right, Penny?
Yeah,
yes.
Penny agrees.
I love it. This is pretty crazy. If you're watching on YouTube, you'll see the chaos that's actually happening here as well. But we're all getting lots of cuddles. So I think the first question I want to kind of work us way into is, so if you're a beginner and you've never done any exercise before, or maybe if you're feeling uncomfortable in the gym, or you've maybe got some weight to lose, what's the first kind of exercises that you should do? What kind of workouts?
Great question. I think one of the best things I always tell people is there's no wrong way to start. The hard part is just starting, right? And one of the first things is usually someone will go in and it'll be like an overload. So they'll go in, they'll try to do too heavy of weights, or they'll try to run 10 miles at a time. They'll get in and say, I need to prepare for a marathon. My goal is this much in 6 months. And they go out and try to put it together 10 miles in the first day. Then you deal with an injury, and then you really never get off the right start. So I always tell people, just start light and work out. It's, if you feel like you want to get back into swimming or you just want to get back into moving and you've been completely sedentary, just start small routines. Put a goal out there, 10, 15 minutes, lightweight. Sometimes you don't even need weight to have a great exercise program. I mean, I feel like you're the queen of those things, lightweight, low resistance, long durations. These are all things that kind of work really well for that population. So if you're just getting out there, just working on more of an endurance type format, just to get the body familiar with it's okay to move, and then progressing from there.
Yeah, even if you're just going out for a walk, if you've hey, I've never done anything before, but I just want to go for a walk, that's a start. I think the thing is we get so bogged down with oh my goodness, I need to run a marathon or I need to lift a certain amount of weight. It's just start to move your body.
Absolutely. It's everyone looks on social media and all these platforms on, hey, I need to meet this expectation. I feel like for all of us, expectations are a huge self-esteem thing for a lot of people. And for us, we just need to set realistic expectations for ourselves and knowing, hey, we've lived this very sedentary lifestyle. What are things that we can do to kind of modify and put ourselves in the best position to get back to moving? Because ultimately, you have that goal, I have that goal. We love that. That's our passion, is just to see people moving. And I feel like we all work together towards that realm.
Absolutely. And why is it so important to exercise? Because if you've got somebody out there right now that's like, hey, I haven't exercised for a while, like it's like finding that motivation as well. But it's like, why is it so important to move our bodies?
Totally. There's so many health benefits. I mean, you could go down like the long list, right? Like everyone hits you with like, you can lower blood pressure, you can improve your HDL, all of these different categories within like the cellular level. But one of the biggest things that I always say is any type of movement will keep joints healthy. It'll keep everything nutritionalized. Your disc space within your vertebral segments of your spine, all of these things need movement because it's like, I always say motion is lotion, you know? The more movement you do...
Are you taking that hashtag?
Hashtag motion is lotion. But the more movement you have, your body responds, you know? And we can do all this stretching and even like yoga, you know? Just starting to move and move that fascia, and you'll reduce a lot of restrictions, and that'll ultimately kind of go into that psychosocial. You know, I don't know about you, but even just 10, 15 minutes of exercise for me boosts my mentality like tenfold. And it just isn't the physical. It's like the physical, the mental, the social well-being. Movement is life, and there's so many benefits on so many categories.
It's like it gives you a free high.
Totally.
That's what I love about it. You know, it's like, you know, sometimes you don't always feel motivated to do any exercise, and I get that, you know, but it's like, what are the benefits afterwards? I feel like if you look at it from that point, and if you, how long do you feel like it takes until you really get into like a sedentary, you know, how long should you not go for exercise? I mean, like, what is it like after a week? What's it like after a month? What's it like after a year? What does that do to your body?
Yeah, great question. I think, you know, any realm of sedentary lifestyle becomes, you fall into that trap of linking multiple days together. And I think that's like the biggest thing is a lot of people fall into that trap where they go, okay, you know what, I'm having a hard time getting out of that sedentary environment. I'm going to start today. They do one day, and then they fall back into the trap of like 4 or 5 days in a row. They always say, you know, after 4 to 6 days of being bedridden in like a hospital where you're just literally laying in bed and you can't get out of it, you're going to see a huge decline. You're going to see a muscle atrophy, which are getting weaker within just 4 days of just laying there. So this just shows how much our body should be moving. And even on the realm of just kind of getting back into shape or getting out of that sedentary lifestyle, like you said at the beginning, even a simple 10, 15-minute walk is a Kickstarter to getting you back into that routine of saying, look, I can do it, you know?
Yeah. So do you think like back in the day, we just used to, obviously we didn't have routines, we didn't have phones, we didn't have to like drive to work. Like our bodies that was what we were designed to do, to like move around. Like, you know, the males would go out and hunt and gather and they're moving their body, and then the women are doing the housework. So that's all the movement too. So it's like we've got into this position where we've just created this static life for ourselves.
Yeah. It's like sitting at a desk. You know, a lot of people out there work at a desk.
It's not normal.
It's not normal. It's not normal. Like, we as humans are built for endurance if you really think about it. Like, our cardiovascular system, our muscle, a lot of the muscles in our body are built for long durations, right? And yes, like if we're looking at big muscles like quadriceps or hamstrings, these are big muscles to handle the load of walking on them throughout the entire day, right? Like your gastrocs or your calf muscles. These are muscles that are really want you to walk every single day because they are meant for you to be standing.
Yeah.
Like, literally 10 to 12 hours at a time. So I always tell people, I'm like, don't shy away from understanding that it's okay to move. And if you're in pain and there's different areas that you feel like, I just don't know where to get started, we can always modify. There's people all around that have a wealth of knowledge. I mean, a lot of your exercise program and routines are so good for a lot of people because it's this low like resistive exercise where you're not loading the joints in all these different areas that could be painful. You're really creating a good foundation for a lot of people.
Yeah, I love that. And so can you do too much exercise? I look at the other expert dealer because I know a lot of times, like some of us, you know, I suffer with an eating disorder in my teens, and I would excessive exercise to be able to get that. And that, if you do too much exercise, you also can't get results.
Exactly. Yeah, same thing. It's like your muscle fibers at the cellular level, right? If we're looking at muscle fibers and you're exercising and you go from 0 to 100 and now you're progressing to where you're like, I need to lift the same muscle. Let's just use a drastic influence, but let's like say you're lifting biceps every single day. Well, just like anything, our body needs to heal. And you will have micro tears at that fiber level. That's what builds muscle, right? That's called hypertrophy. So if you're not allowing those muscles to heal and you're just constantly going like 100 miles an hour, you're not getting that caloric intake, you're essentially just breaking down that tissue to a point where there's people that actually don't see results from doing too much. You know, there's always these rest days, but this is where people fall kind of out of bounds is they go, okay, I need a rest day. Let's do nothing, you know? And for me, I like active rest days. I think those are huge. Like for yourself, adding in like a yoga day or adding in just a stretch and maybe a 15-minute walk day. It kind of gives you the opportunity to still stay moving, but you're also not feeling like you're taking steps back for those people that feel like I need to be 100 miles an hour every single day.
Right.
You know?
And I think that's the thing that people get confused in. They're like, hey, well, what if I just, exercise for like 2 to 3 hours a day? It's like, you don't need to do that to get results.
Totally.
Yeah.
No, it could be focused. Like I always tell people, it's 45 minutes. If you can go in and do 30 to 45 minutes of exercise, look at these guys.
Come on then. You want to come up?
Come on. Nope, doesn't want to come up. But if you could do like 45 minutes of exercise or even 30 minutes, like we stated, 15 minutes at minimum, you can get up, just walk. All of these things will kickstart your whole entire plan, you know? And for myself, you don't need to go in and do 3 hours of high intensity exercise. High intensity workouts, hit intervals, these are all designed for short bouts of high accelerated heart rate. You're gonna bring it down, up, down for 30 minutes and you're done. So there's all workout programs and lifestyles that people can fit into, and it's all depending on kind of what their environment is like, what their life is kind of working around. Do they have kids? Do they have family members? Do they have a work-life balance where they can get out? How many minutes do they have in a day to exercise? These all kind of fit in those categories too.
Yeah, and do you think that there's any like exercises or types of style of workout that maybe you wouldn't advertise to some of your clients? Because I know I've been to a couple of workout classes at the gym and done some exercise moves that have really put my back out because I haven't had the right training, or maybe just the actual the exercise itself is just not good for the human body. Is there any exercises that you feel are like people should stay away from?
Yeah, so this is where it comes into like adaptation, you know? I think if you're someone who comes in from like a yoga background and then you're trying to get into CrossFit, your body's probably not gonna adapt very well. And you're gonna have a lot of trouble kind of loading that joint appropriately. Where if you have like a power weightlifter, they're going to try to get into yoga and they might actually strain themselves by trying to overstretch. So injury is always correspondent with how much load, and if you overload it, that's when an injury develops. So I don't like to say there's not one workout program that's like horrible for someone. I just say it has to be progressively tolerated. So if you're someone that's coming from a different background and you're trying to get into CrossFit or you're trying to get into this high intensity regimen, this is where progressive loading comes into play, starting slow and then working out. I never like to turn anyone off on a workout area that they feel like, okay, this is good for me. What I like to do is say, okay, you believe that's like where your fun's at, that's where you feel like motivation in. Let's modify at the start and kind of throw you in there and get you slowly built up to where you don't have this over progressive load. And that's when you get tendonitis and back strains and lower back strain. These are all things that come in with overload too quickly. Yeah, I agree with that too. It's like, it's not this, I say whatever exercise that you love to do that because you're more likely to do it, because at least then that's going to get you to move. But it's people that maybe feel like, they want to like just jump into something too quickly. Do you believe in like a balanced, we talk about balanced nutrition, but you also believe in like balanced fitness? So a little bit of stretching, some cardio, some weights, some do you like a little bit of everything? Absolutely. Like you were saying earlier, and I know you do a lot of different things. It's the same thing that I believe everyone could kind of jump into this realm. There's not a one size fits all approach. That's what's beautiful about this kind of environment. And most people, they find healthy habits along their way. So yes, adding stretching a day, that maybe could be your active recovery day. And then saying, you know what, today's going to be my longer distance run. If I like running or swimming, okay, I'm going to load, meaning like strength training several days a week. Adding all of these areas are super beneficial. And I think a well-rounded approach really gives you the opportunity to meet any demand that life brings at you. If your friend hits you up and is like, hey, we're gonna go bike for 20 miles, you're not gonna be like, oh my gosh, I can't do it today. Or, hey, I wanna go on this long hike. you're going to be like, okay, I'm ready, because you've kind of trained in a realm where your body can handle those loads in different areas.
Yeah.
And it keeps you ready to kind of do a lot of things.
It's like jack of all trades, but master of none.
Cool.
That's me. I'm
Well-rounded,
like,
right?
it's well-rounded. You know, I went through, you know, phases where I wanted to like lift super heavy, and I got to like 355 pounds on a hip thrust, and that was cool. That was like one thing I wanted to do. But then I was like, but I can't run. Like my endurance is down. So it's like I prefer to have a balance of being able to run, have endurance, but also have that strength as well to create lean muscle so that our bones are nice and strong. All right, so talking about, I think, injuries, or let's talk about specific points. When someone has bad knees, what kind of exercises should they avoid? Or is there something that, when someone says they have bad knees, does that mean that they've had an injury in the past, or is there something that we can do to make sure that they're stretching their knees? Like, I just have people all the time say, I've got really bad knees, what should I do?
What should I do? Totally. So knees in general, we know they're a hinge joint. They're not moving all sorts of directions like the shoulder. You know, there's so many variables within the shoulder. Shoulder is obviously a little bit more complicated. But the knee itself, we just know when someone hits you with like a knee injury, it's kind of like, okay, well, what is the knee injury from, or why do you have bad knees? And it could be a lot of things, you know, overweight creates osteoarthritis, bone on bone, right? It could be a little meniscal tear. It could be ligament tears that really they haven't ever done surgery for. There's a lot of people out there walking around with no ACL, and that's perfectly fine, but it also creates a little bit of laxity in that area, in that joint. And then now you know, okay, hey, I have bad knees, you know? So I think bad knees is like a global term.
Right, and sometimes it could be bad for a bit and then it goes.
Totally.
Yeah.
And what a lot of people don't realize is actually more movement and more exercise will improve your knee pain, and you'll actually get to a point where you can strengthen accordingly. So a lot of people that have bad knees, I try to encourage like at least starting a plan that, let's say you have a lot of pain walking. Okay, well, let's not walk. Let's start maybe like on a bike, or let's start maybe swimming, or doing squats in a pool, or like doing a lot of side stuff, like via off the yoga mat with like clamshells and TheraBand stuff. And if you're in a knee position where bending it too much, like if you have a meniscal tear, usually a really deep knee flexion will be a pain. So get out of that a little bit and start loading and really strengthening, because ultimately, the stronger we are in our muscles, it protects our joints. So, you know, ligaments are there as like kind of this protective mechanism, but the muscles are the ones that really handle the load. They're the shock absorbers.
Yeah.
You know? So I always encourage, if someone has knee pain, find an area where they feel comfortable exercising without pain, but let's not shy away from strengthening, because ultimately, if we can strengthen the muscles in a pain-free zone, they're going to start walking around and be like, wow, my knees went from bad knees to feeling really good.
Yeah.
And there's people all over the place. Like, they don't tell you this, but like osteoarthritis, the only time it really warrants surgery is if someone's walking around with a ton of knee pain and they're like, I just can't do it. There's so many people that get MRIs and x-rays on their knees, and there's all these different issues going on, but they have no issues. And this happens all the time. You see people go in for MRIs and x-rays and say, oh, I have like a disc bulge and all of these things. This is kind of the normal process with everyday life. The older we get, our joints...
So it's just like, that's just kind of what happens sometimes. Yeah,
Totally.
if you're out of whack too.
Yeah. And we're all come from these different spaces of injuries and athletics. Oh, I twisted my knee here and there. There's going to be all these traumas along the journey. The thing is, I don't want people to read into like their MRI so much where they become, oh my gosh, I'm done for, or I'm catastrophic. And a lot of people fall into that realm like, oh, the doctor told me I have bad knees and I won't ever be able to do this.
Yeah.
So I highly encourage, find a plan that works and then just move out from there.
I like that too, because I do hear a lot. It's like, oh, I've got bad knees. It's like, well, let's see how we can strengthen that knee, because sometimes if you don't do any exercise, you're going to actually make it worse.
Totally.
And like, okay, another question that we get sometimes is like, you know, my knee is clicking or my hip is clicking. Now, my hip clicks sometimes my shoulder clicks. Like, is that just a normal thing sometimes? Like, it just happens?
Yeah. I always tell people, come in, they're like, you know, my shoulder has been clicking. And I'm like, well, do you have pain with that? And a lot of the times they say no. For us, when we hear clicking or any of these things, that doesn't mean there's a problem at the joint. There's so many things. It could mean like a tendon's rolling over. Oh, unless it's painful, I don't even acknowledge it. Just for the most part, like painful joints, All these things could have clicking, and a lot of people look like, oh my gosh, is there something wrong?
Yes,
right?
yeah.
And there's this anxiety, hypersensitivity. Like, I really feel our minds can do a lot to our body. You know, like even just a little stress. You'll notice like, oh, my neck's been stiff lately.
Sounds like Corey.
Right?
God, he's always doing that. I'm like, will you shut up? You're fine. He's like out there icing. He's like, I really need to stretch. I think I've tweaked my back.
This is where like stress comes into play. And like when people get more stressed, they have all these little issues like coming about. So for myself, I try to look at the whole person, what's really going on, taking a huge history and trying to solve every piece of the puzzle. Because you know as much as I know, it's a lot of psychosocial and then there's a lot of injury bases. So the clicking to wrap it all in is not always an injury. There's not always a problem. There's a lot of little things like your tendon rolling over the bone, and it doesn't truly matter unless there's pain with that. Then we will see, okay, what's going on.
Right, and it has to be quite acute pain. I mean, sometimes when you do exercise, you might just tweak something. That's normal too, right? What would you do in that? If you feel like you've maybe hurt your back or hurt your neck or something, what is the recovery process? Is it ice, rest? You know, how long, what's the process there?
Totally. So the thing is it's always different for each area, like your back, right? If we have a big injury to your back and like you say you're bending over and you feel like you have like a disc bulge or something, one of the best things to do is not lay down. Everyone thinks we need to lay down and just rest on your back. It is actually making the problem worse. So anyone that just feels like they injured their back like right away, get up and start walking around and trying to stay up on your feet for a couple of hours to let that kind of calm down. And then as far as ice and all of these different things and modalities, that's what we call them, you can heat or ice depending on what's been going on. So let's say you twisted your knee, like you said. If there's a lot of inflammation in that knee, then what you can do is you can say, okay, ice would be more beneficial because you're calming down that inflammation.
Right, okay.
However, if it's a chronic situation where you've had, let's say, like a back strain that's been bothering you for like 2 or 3 months, there's no inflammation, that's a good sign that heat could probably be more beneficial. So like going in the jacuzzi and then stretching a little bit after that tissue feels a little bit more relaxed. These are all things that kind of during an injury or an injury happens or in the chronic phase of an injury, these are things that you can kind of throw out there and say, okay, what would be more beneficial?
And do you think you should rest your whole body, or say if you've like done something to your knee, should you still kind of move your arms and do some stuff, or should you like completely rest?
I am 100%, I feel like you know where this is going, but I'm 100% movement is medicine.
Yes.
So even if someone hurts their knee, I'm already moving it the same day if they come in. That's protocol. I've never heard or have studied in all these years that rest is the option. Even if someone has the flu or someone has, all these different kind of comorbidities, the answer should never be go home and just rest. Because we know, even if you're fighting off a flu, even just like a 2-minute walk, a 3-minute walk, we're kind of kicking our immune system into gear. We're pumping vitamin C, all of these things. But if we're just sitting there sedentary and not moving at all and just feeling like, we're going to feel worse. Our body won't be able to get out of it. So like moving on the outside is essentially moving on the inside. And that's why I feel like that's kind of how I go about it.
I love that too. I think a lot of times people are like, oh, well, I've hurt my back a little. I'm going to rest. I'm going to rest. Sometimes it's a bit of an excuse.
Oh, yeah. That's like fires me up, Like that is the time out of all times to not rest. To move.
To move. All right. So last question. We're going to talk about being sore after a workout. Should you be sore? Do you want to be sore? Like, is it good? Is it bad? Like, what's the answer there?
Yeah. So if you're doing like we were talking about earlier, like if you're trying to get into like a marathon and you're running 8 to 10 miles and progressing to get to that, okay, my marathon's coming up in a month. These are all areas that you want to see. Okay, is this the first time you've tried to stretch it out to 8 miles, 9 miles, 10 miles? You probably will be sore, and that's okay because soreness is obviously those muscle fibers like we were talking about. There's little kind of injuries going on there. So muscle soreness is okay. You don't necessarily need to say, okay, hey, every workout I go, I should expect like this huge muscle soreness tear. Obviously, if you're working to try to improve your muscle strength and hypertrophy, like if you're doing strength training, the more you break those muscle fibers, the more hypertrophy is going to develop because your body adapts to that. So it all falls into the play of like what you're trying to do. Obviously, if you go to yoga, those are areas that actually help reduce a lot of soreness. So you're probably going to feel great, but not have that kind of soreness load. So these are all areas where, yes, it all depends on what you're trying to accomplish. So someone who's going for that marathon and they've reached mile 8 and they've done that now consecutively over the next 3 weeks to a month, it's not that big of a deal to say, oh, hey, I'm not getting sore anymore. That's actually a good sign saying my body is capable of adapting to this environment. Now I could actually push myself more because my body is used to that approach. And this is where progressive loading comes into play. So yes, soreness is good in some areas. Sometimes soreness doesn't mean necessarily like you got any more of a workout than what you've already done. There's all these different areas.
Right, I think that's the misconception too. It's like, oh, well, you didn't work out hard enough if you weren't sore.
Totally.
Right, then that's not true.
Not true. It all depends on what you're trying to accomplish. Like for yourself, if we're moving and you're going on a walk, I highly disagree that you're going to go out for a walk and say, okay, I'm going to feel sore after that. Right. So it all depends on what you're trying to accomplish. But for the most part, no. Me and you, if we walked 15 minutes, we can come back and say, yes, we moved for 15 minutes. That was actually a good start to my day / exercise. Any movement is exercise. Doesn't necessarily mean you have to be sore. It just means we need to get moving.
Right, yeah, totally. And that's the thing, it's like, sometimes you might feel sore because there might have been a new move that was in that workout that you haven't done before, and that's just waking up some different muscle groups as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And
I loved your post that you did the other day. You said it's not 80% nutrition. And I was like, what? And you're like, it's 100% nutrition. It was like, no, 80% of the abs are not made in the kitchen. What was it?
Oh, I could look it up real quick. I don't even remember.
It was great. It was really great. But it's like, I do always talk about, 80% is nutrition, 20% is the fitness, and 80% is the mindset. But your post was funny. It says 80% of weight loss is not found in the kitchen. And I was like, what? That doesn't make sense. And you're like, no, it's 100%. Because you do want to have that 100% mindset of how you having the food in the kitchen, how you are with your workout. So your mentality is like 100, 100, 100. Yes. All the percents.
Always good effort, right?
Yeah.
But you nailed it. You're right? A huge thing to finding weight loss or any journey is having that caloric deficit, right? There's so many ways of finding that, with nutritional wise, and there's so many diets out there. Just pick one that fits your fancy. And a lot of people, like, if you're using your nutrition plans, whatever it may be, they will tailor it towards what they're trying to accomplish. At the end of the day, if you have a caloric deficit, you're going to have weight loss.
Right.
If that's never happened, then come talk to me, because I would love to hear if someone's had like a caloric gain and have had weight, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's where exercise stirs the pot. But the whole thing to weight loss and having longevity with that and feeling well and feeling great comes through that 100% mentality of saying, okay, this is where I want to go. This is my goals. This is where I'm trying to achieve. So everyone says 80-20, 80% of abs are found in the kitchen, 80% of nutrition loss or weight loss is found in the kitchen. Yes, but I like to argue that, and I'm always on that edge with people, but they agree that it's 100% how much you see yourself, all the goals that you're trying to set, where you're trying to get to. That's what really dictates your progression or how much weight you're going to lose. And no one really kind of talks about that very often. They always just say, okay, here's the caloric deficit, this is what you got to get into, and then you're going to have results.
Right.
We know that, but longevity wise and keeping that off, you need to have that mentality of, it's okay if I went out and had one little cookie or something. It's not the end of the world, but let's get back into that same mindset of, okay, let's get back and follow our goals.
Yep, I completely agree. 100% mindset all the way. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I really, really appreciate it. So much value for all of our audience. And tell everybody, where can they find you on all the platforms?
Yes.
You're everywhere.
No, not like you. But you can find me on Instagram, TikTok, and podcast. All the same username, Body of Youth. And yeah, that's where you can find me.
I love it. And TikTok too, you are blowing up on TikTok. There's so many great little videos that are like 15, 20 seconds that really help with mobility. With like, I've seen one where you've got a tennis ball where you're showing about like the back pain and the shoulders. So definitely something to look out for. Well, again, thank you so much for coming on the show. Really appreciate it. Guys, make sure that you go and give Clint a follow, give him a like on all of his photos, and we will see you next time. Bye guys. Bye. You got that one person in your family or your friends group and you're like, oh my goodness, here we go. They're gonna moan and they're gonna complain and then they're gonna moan again.